Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Isaac Christopher Lubogo. Welcome today to interesting discussions. Perhaps let me start by introducing our book here, How to Get Away with Murder, in terms of Betham and Stuart Mill's Unitarianism jurisprudence. But today, the importance of my discussion is to tell you something about what they call the philosophy of truth and lies, navigating what they call the social order in Money Heist and the Invention of Lying. Some of you know those two movies, Money Heist and Invention of Lying. And I'd like to give a comparative analysis in terms of the realm of intellectual exploration. The argument is to beckon you into some kind of philosophical odyssey, discerning a gaze by way of intersection through truth and lies. And therefore, the argument of the philosophy of truth and lies in terms of navigating the social order in Money Heist and the Invasion of Lying and beyond will definitely stand as a profound invitation to traverse the complex landscapes of human ethics, social dynamics, and the enigmatic interplay between authenticity and deception. Listen, I'm not teaching you guys a lie. I'm just telling you the invasion of lying and things that have to do with things in terms of philosophical dispensation. So as I guide you through this philosophical maze embedded into two captivating narratives, Money Heist and the Invasion of Lying, these narratives serve as a canvas upon which I will paint an intricate tapestry of what they call existential dilemmas, moral quandaries, and even societal commentaries. So through the lens of these tales, I will try to further a thread of existential authenticity in terms of Unitarian calicus and also deontological duties, and also social constructivism using pragmatic considerations in terms of evolution and nuisance of moral consciousness. So basically the title will invoke us to, especially in terms of the beyond, to give us a transcendency that confines into fictional narratives, yes, but also open-minded or invitations into a contemplation of philosophical implications in terms of truth and lies beyond so-called scripted worlds. Yeah, and my argument is to challenge us to unveil the mysteries of human existence, where the boundaries between reality and fiction blur, and also philosophical inquiries persist in the intricate narratives of our own lives. Yes, so listen, as we embark on this intellectual expedition, listen, the argument is to propound us to scrutinize these philosophical landscapes as a question of emphasis in terms of where the authenticity of self collides with societal expectations, where pragmatic deployment of lies intersects with moral duties, and where the power of dynamic truth and deception shape the very foundation of our order in society. And sometimes you may wonder, especially those of you who watch those movies, you probably comprehend where I'm coming from. So in essence, the philosophy in terms of truth and lies becomes a philosophical symphony, as I said, and the intention is to harmonize insights into these existentialists or utilitarians or deontologists, call them social theorists or pragmatists, in terms of moral psychological dispensation. So I will invite you not only to decipher the intricacies of fictional narratives, but as I engage in deeper reflection for purposes of profound questions that resonate through the questions or the corridors of human thought. And I'll escalate the essence of intellectual transcendency in terms of these scripted narratives from the two dispositions that I'm talking about. And I'll try to create an exploration by way of resonating with timeless philosophical inquiries in terms of resonating or perhaps also creating an enduring quest for understanding the delicate balance between truth and lies and their role in shaping the very fabric of our own society or in terms of our own existence. As I said, sometimes we may only find ourselves living on lies without knowing actually that we're being lied, and yet we thrive on and on and on. Yes, so in the quest of unraveling this intricacy, listen, in terms of truth and lies, again, I will try as much as possible to rely on certain movies that you and I may be aware, like Money Heist. Money Heist, the original called, they used to call it what? La Casca de Papel. Remember La Casa de Papel? It's a Spanish heist crime drama that gained international popularity, and the show was actually created by Alex Pina and actually has become one of the most watched non-English, now translated into English, series on streaming platforms, including Netflix. Not so. And therefore, the question of understanding or comprehending, or giving you a background for purposes of those of you who comprehend the movie Money Heist, follows as a group of robbers who, under the guidance of their enigmatic leader known as the Professor, not so, the Professor, plan and execute heist on the Royal Mint of Spain and the Bank of Spain. Yeah, and the series explores the themes of crime, love, strategy, and resistance. And the show's unique storytelling, character development, and intricate plot have actually contributed to its global success. So this intellectual journey transcends mere analysis of a scripted narrative. It ventures into the very essence of human existence and societal dynamics. As I said, drawing inspiration from the profound inquiries of existentialism, Unitarianism, deontological ethics, and the pragmatic considerations of truth and manipulation. So please be open-minded and be a seeker of wisdom, okay, who seeks to illuminate your mind in terms of comprehending the complexities that have to do with truth and lies throughout history. I think it was Winston Churchill who said, sometimes the truth becomes so precious that it has to be guided with a bodyguard of what? Of lies. So my inquiry is confined not to, as I said, fictional of the so-called Royal Mint or the Bank of Spain. Rather, it extends to reach a broader canvas of human experience in terms of my exploration, so that I choose to inspire you to understand the invasion of lies, recognizing it not merely as a narrative device, but also as a profound lens through which we can use to scrutinize the very fabric of our society. And maybe by the end of discussion, you may realize, wait a minute, am I based on a lie? Am I founded in a lie? Something of the sort, not so. So the philosophy of truth, as I said, in terms of Money Heist and beyond, definitely will serve as a gateway in terms of giving us this intellectual endeavor. My argument here, it will beckon us to engage in a reflective journey where we understand fictional narratives of the series that converges with timeless philosophical inquiries. So like a philosophical alchemist, I'll seek to distill the essence of truth in terms of lies, contemplating their impact on individual authenticity, societal stability, and the moral tapestry that weaves the fabric of our human connections. Remember that. And the paradox here is how lies can actually become the architects of social order. Okay? And the question, of course, is how to navigate the terrain of existential angst, where the individuals grapple with the weight of deception against the backdrop of broader society imperatives. And the narrative of Money Heist, for example, becomes a philosophical allegory, inviting us to question not only the character, the choices, but also their own ethical compass in terms of the face of complex of truth, and also in terms of comparing of lies. You will comprehend as we continue, and you will understand that not all that glitters is what? Is gold. Remember that. So, as I try to wave through the insights from, Sartre's existentialism philosophy, Mill's utilitarianism, Calcus and people like Kant's deontological principles, and the pragmatic worldview of William James, I will draw inspirations again from these philosophical luminaries, and I will aim to illuminate the moral landscapes where truth and lies coalesce, exposing the tension between individual freedoms and societal responsibilities. This is a super important discussion for those of you who like jurisprudence, but also for those of you who like philosophy, but more importantly for those of you who like living over and above the edge, who live and don't want to be boxed, who think outside the box and throw the box away. Not so. So as we continue to demystify the complex in terms of the philosophy of truth and lies, I will invite you to join me, my friends, in this odyssey. Remember, my intention is to invite you to contemplate, to introspect, and also to have what they call appreciate a profound implication of the invasion of lies and its role in terms of shaping the intricate dance between truth and society and harmonious relationship. So that's the importance of the title of the discussion that we're going to have. But as I said, we will base a lot in terms of existentialism, Unitarianism. Some of you have looked at this book, and that's where we base a lot of it, deontological ethics, and also the power dynamics. And I'll emphasize the examination of truth in terms of lies, and also in terms of social context of the series, as I said, of these two movies that we may know: money heist and the invention of what? Lying. Some of you remember that, yeah? Now listen, something extremely important for us to comprehend, even as we understand the discussion that we're trying to comprehend here, is the concept of invention, especially in terms of the invention of lies, is often explored in philosophy and also in literature and in films, yeah? It questions the nature of truth in terms of ethics and in terms of human communication. And in a broader sense, it delves into what they call societal implications in terms of dishonesty and the role of truth in maintaining social order. And that's why sometimes you understand, but it's a lie, but it's helping us to maintain social order. So the theme is thought-provoking and prompting a reflection in terms of complexities of human relationships and the impact of deceit on individual and collective well-being. How many times have we told lies to our loved ones just because we want them to do certain things? How many times have we made nations or perhaps created things on the basis of lies, and on the concept, and the very concept of that has actually created sustainability? So the invention of lies has actually been explored, as I said, through various disciplines, including philosophy, including literature, and majorly into movies and other things. So the idea often delves in the nature of truth, human communication, in terms of societal implication, and also in terms of, of course, in terms of dishonesty. So the exploration of the invention of lies prompts a reflection into the complexities of human relationship and the role of truth in terms of individual and the collective well-being. And I'm going to give you some philosophical considerations as we comprehend this aspect in terms of truth versus lies. Now, when you're arguing in terms of the nature of truth, philosophers have for long debated the nature of truth and its role in terms of human existence. And the concept of invention of lies raises questions about the purpose and the consequences of departing from truth. So there have been quite a number of philosophical inquiries into truth, such as those by existentialist thinkers. They often focus on the authenticity of individual existence and the impact of dishonesty on personal identity. Yeah, and when you argue in terms of ethics and deception, ethic theories, including things like deontological or utilitarianism and the virtue of ethics, provide frameworks for what they call evaluating the morality of lies. Therefore, the invention of lies can actually be seen as a departure from ethical principles, and philosophical discussions often revolve around circumstances under which the deception may actually be justified or even condemned. Not so. Now, let's dive a little bit deeper. Bear with me, ladies and gentlemen. If we comprehend this subject in terms of literary exploration, there's what they call dystopian fiction. Some works of dystopian fiction explore societies where truth is actually manipulated or suppressed. Authors like George Orwell, some of you know that, not so, in 1984, and Aldous Huxley in The Brave New World, they depict a world where the control of information and the invasion of lies serve the interest of those in power. And that's something very important. So these literary explorations often serve as a cautionary tales about the consequences of truth and distortion. Not so. If you argue in terms of what they call existential themes, existentialist literature, in terms of, for example, exemplified works of Jean-Paul Sartre and even Albert Camus, often grapple with the search of meaning and authenticity. Yeah? And therefore, the question in terms of the invasion of lies can actually be seen as a betrayal of one's authentic self, leading to what they call existential crises explored in literature. Yes? If you argue that in the complex of films and media, the invasion of lying, as I said, in terms of the film itself, the invasion of lying provides a fictional exploration of a world where nobody can lie until one individual discovers the ability to do so. Think about that. And what are the consequences when they discover the ability to do so? So the film humorously and satirically examines the consequences and ethical implications of dishonesty. It delves into the question of morality, personal relationships, and also societal norms when lies become actually possible. And that's the question of debate that you may want to comprehend even as you argue and comprehend these philosophical dilemmas or challenges, if you like. And then we could argue in terms of what they call media manipulation, which is very common. Not so. In the age of information, discussions about invasion of lies extends to concerns about media manipulation and the spread of disinformation. Not so. So philosophical considerations encompass the impact of false narratives in terms of public perception, in terms of trust and also functioning of what they call democratic societies. Like some people say democracies in Africa may mean a very different thing in terms of democracies in other countries, not to mention the so-called first world countries. And then if you're arguing in terms of cultural and psychological dimensions, I would also argue that cultural perspectives, for example, the acceptance or condemnation of lying varies across different cultures. Not so. Some cultures may actually place high value on honesty, while others actually view a certain form of deception as socially acceptable. Not to mention a particular tribe in this country where we all know that they're all liars. Not so. So exploring the invention of lies from a cultural standpoint involves understanding how different societies approach truth, and also in terms of falsehood, as it were. So bear with me as we continue deeper into this subject. Now, when you're understanding psychological impact, psychologically, the invention of lies can actually have a profound effect on individuals and societies. And the question is that studies on deception and trust explore how dishonesty influences relationship in terms of mental well-being and even what they call social dynamics. And that's something, again, you may want to comprehend. Then there's an interesting one also, what they call existential angst. Okay, existential angst. Now, in terms of establishing what they call authenticity and alienation, existentialist thinkers often discuss that angst are associated with the quest for authenticity. Yeah, the argument here is that the invention of lies can actually contribute to feelings of alienation and existential angst, and as individuals grapple with the conflict between societal expectations and their own true selves, as a dilemma. And that is something, again, you may want to comprehend. Also, if you're arguing in terms of freedom and responsibility, existentialism emphasizes individual freedoms and responsibility. So the invention of lies introduces ethical dilemmas related to the responsible use of, for example, newfound freedom, and raising questions about the consequences of choosing deception over truth. And that is something, again, that you may also want to comprehend. So the point I'm trying to comprehend here, my friends, is that the concept of the invention of lies is a rich and multidimensional theme that engages with philosophical, literary, and also cinematic, cultural, and even psychological dimension. And it serves as a proactive or provocative lens through which to examine the complexities of truth in terms of deception and the impact of dishonesty on individuals and societies. So this is serious business, my friend, as we begin to comprehend some of these aspects. Now listen. It's also important for us to comprehend that the concept of invention of lies, as explored in the philosophy and in terms of literature and film, doesn't have direct real-world applications in the sense of a tangible invention. However, its thematic elements have actually been reflected in various real-world contexts, such as the fields of information, media, and also psychology. And I'm going to give some examples to underscore some of the things that I'm trying to comprehend in that perspective. Yes. In media manipulation and disinformation, evidently, lies have been employed to the maximum. Yeah, in terms of the phenomenon, for example, the phenomenon of disinformation campaigns and media manipulation in a real-world application, or the themes that are related to the invention of lies, governments and political entities and group interests where may actually deliberately spread false information to influence public opinion, or even sow discord and even achieve specific goals. So we have seen that eminently being employed by governments and big institutions or political institutions for that purpose. An example is in terms of the interference in terms of elections through the spread of misinformation, as documented by various intelligence agencies and even investigative journalists. Is an example of real-world consequences of manipulating the truth. Not so. And so that's a dilemma when it comes to aspects to do with the invasion of lying, and how lying can, quote-unquote, be seen to help people in terms of propagation of society. And then we could also argue it in terms of what they call psychological impact of deception. By way of example, psychological studies consistently demonstrate the impact of deception on individuals and society. Research in areas such as societal psychology and behavioral economics provide evidence on how lies, even so-called white lies, can actually influence trust in terms of relationship and even decision making. And that's super important. I think now you're beginning to comprehend the importance of the subject and the psychology behind lying, and the argument of the invention of lying, and how lying has substantially affected the world. An example, studies examining trust dynamics in relationships and the consequences of deception on mental well-being highlight the real-world implications for individuals who actually experience or engage in dishonesty. Yeah, I'll give another example. In terms of what they call corporate and financial deception, and that's where money heist comes in. You will comprehend in terms of financial deception how it was able to, bring back the economy after being lied that was the gold was true, yet it was fake. So in terms of case of, for example, corporate fraud or financial scandals, deceptive business practices, these illustrate real-world consequences of dishonesty. Regulatory bodies, investigative journalism, and legal proceedings often uncover instances where truth has actually been manipulated for personal or even for organized gain. And that is something that you may want to comprehend. I'll give an example. Scandals such as the so-called Enron scandal or cases of financial and even fraud demonstrate how the manipulation of financial information can actually have far-reaching consequences for investigators and even employees and the broader economy, as it were. I'll also argue in terms of what they call political propaganda, which is again super important. Perhaps that's where eminently we see a lot of lies taking place. Not so. By way of evidence, throughout history, political leaders and regimes have actually employed propaganda and manipulation of information to control narratives and consolidate themselves into power. Not so. Yeah? Examples of state-sponsored propaganda campaigns or even censorship, they serve as real-world instances of the strategical use of lies for political purposes. I just gave you an example of Winston Churchill, the great statesman. Yeah, and then I'll give an example in terms of the use of propaganda during the authoritarian regimes of people like Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia, which involved a lot of international distortion of facts to shape political perception and even the control of narrative. Hitler used to say that people hated Germans because they had blue eyes. Guess what? Hitler himself didn't have blue eyes, he actually had black eyes. So you can imagine how he was able to maintain that kind of balance in terms of propounding his ideologies. Then today we have what they call deep fakes and digital manipulation in terms of advances in technology, particularly the rise of deep fake technology, which have introduced new challenges that are related to manipulation of visual and even audio information. Deep fakes can actually be used to create realistic looking videos of individuals saying or even doing things they never did, blurring the line between truth and fiction. And that's something that you have to grapple with in the world today, because that's where technology is, that's where AI is today. Deepfake is really eminently used. An example is that instances of deepfake videos being used to spread, for example, false information or even create convincing fake content that have raised concerns about potential for technology to be exploited for deceptive purposes. And that is something that we have to super careful about. So the argument here is that while the concept of the invasion of lies itself is a more is more abstract, its themes are evident in these real-world applications where truth is intentionally manipulated, often with significant consequences for individuals and the society. And the evidence comes from, as I said, from various sources, including investigative journalism, academic research, legal proceedings, and even documented instances of disinformation and even campaigns and deception. Yeah? Now, listen. Something that is extremely important for us to comprehend is that philosophically, justifying the potential benefits of the concept of the invasion of lies in modern world is a very complex task. And as the ethical considerations surrounding dishonesty are often contentious, not so. However, some philosophical perspectives could actually be explored to provide a nuanced undertaking or understanding. And it's important to note that these arguments don't necessarily endorse dishonesty, but rather examine potential positive aspects in certain contexts. And I'm going to give some philosophical angles to that effect. And one of them is what they call Unitarianism and social harmony. As I said, we base this book on Unitarianism because when people say how to get away with murder, wait a minute, are you teaching people to kill one another? No, I'm just trying to comprehend jurisprudence for you. So philosophical justification from a Unitarian perspective, one might argue that occasional white lies or strategic omissions can contribute to social harmony and overall well-being. So the idea is that in certain situations, the avoidance of unnecessary conflict or emotional distress through mild deception could actually lead to a more positive overall outcome. Not so. Mild deception is the operative word here. And that's something that you may want to comprehend. By way of an example, for example, in diplomatic relationships, carefully choosing language or withdrawing certain information might actually, be argued to prevent misunderstandings and even foster cooperation contributing to global stability, and that is super important. I hope now you understand where we're coming from in terms of the invention of lying. Yeah, and then if you argue in terms of pragmatism and effective communication, by way of philosophical justification, a pragmatic perspective might actually suggest that in real world, complete and absolute transparency can actually be impracticable or even detrimental. So the argument of pragmatism could actually justify the use of selective information sharing or tactful communication to achieve practical goals. These are interesting discussions, and please comprehend with me, I'm not propounding for lies per se, but I'm just trying to lay bare for you the jurisprudence behind some of the things. For example, in negotiations, or emphasizing positive aspects while downplaying negatives may actually be seen as a pragmatic approach in terms of achieving mutually beneficial agreements. Not so, and that's something that you may want to comprehend as well. And then you could also argue in terms of what they call existential freedom and self-presentation. By way of arguing in terms of philosophical justification, from an existentialist standpoint, one might argue that individuals have actually freedom to shape their own narratives and self-presentations. So in certain situations, the ability to choose what aspects of one's life to disclose or emphasize can actually be viewed as an exercise of what they call their existential freedom. And that's something important. So what you don't know will not hurt you, not so. So for example, in personal relationships, individuals might actually choose not to disclose certain past experiences if they believe that doesn't align with their current self concept, or if it's not relevant to that particular relationship, not so. So again, those are important components by way of understanding and comprehending what I'm talking about. And then you could also argue it in terms of what they call cultural relativism, or what they call societal norms. And under that, we are trying to comprehend what they call philosophical justification in terms of cultural relativism. We posit that ethical standards are actually culturally dependent, not so. So in some cultures, certain forms of deception may actually be socially accepted, and adherence to cultural norms could actually be seen as legitimate ethical frameworks. I'll give an example. In cultures, for example, where social niceties and politeness are highly valued, not so, or telling small or positive lies in social interaction may actually be considered a culturally acceptable practices. A little bit of lies, not so. So that is something again you may want to comprehend. And then you may also want to think about what they call hedonism. Hedonism and emotional well-being, extremely important. Hedonism and emotional well-being, if you argue in terms of philosophical justification for it, from a hedonistic standpoint, the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain is the ultimate goal. Yeah. So one could argue that small and well-intended lies that actually contribute to positive emotional experiences may align with what they call hedonistic pursuit of the overall happiness. Not so. I'll give an example. Offering, for example, compliments or even expressing appreciation, even if slightly exaggerated, not so, may be seen as a contributing to positive emotional states of both individuals and what social groups. Aren't we all victims sometimes when you tell that to our loved ones or even friends or kids or even politicians? Not so. Yeah. So some of the things come from that bearing. I'm writing another book called Schadenfreude, and Schadenfreude is the other opposite, taking plate or pleasure in the spiteful joy in the suffering of another person. But anyway, the important thing here is to explore the potential in terms of specific contextual ethical considerations in terms of cultural norms and potential consequences in terms of deception that should always be critically examined. So the argument here is that my discussion in terms of the surrounding of the invention of lies involves, as I said, an exploration of the tensions between truthfulness and pragmatic consideration in terms of human complex interactions. And that's the point I'm trying to solve. Now, we're going to explore a little bit of money heist so that we put the nail on the coffin, like they say. Not so. If you had to argue philosophically, examining how the manipulation of truth and lies in the context of gold heist that happened in that movie, it contributes to maintaining social order. We will discuss it chronologically so that you can understand the key events in terms of this series. Some of you I know are very popular with it. Number one, the argument of concealing the gold heist, okay, the gold heist for that purpose. The truth hidden. Philosophically, as a perspective, initially the truth of the gold heist is concealed by the robbers, yeah? And this concealment, aligns with what they call consequentialist perspective. So where the emphasis is on the consequences of actions. So from the robber's standpoint, revealing the truth immediately could lead to chaos, panic, and even potentially violent reactions, as it were. And by way of example, the decision to keep the haste is a secret is driven by the perceived consequence of disclosing the truth to the public, which could lead to economic instability, social unrest, and potential harm to the individuals. Yes, remember that. Number two, if you have to argue in terms of economic collapse, where the truth is now revealed, remember, now the truth is what? Revealed. If you have to argue in terms of philosophical perspective, the revelation of the truth that the gold is actually missing results in an economic collapse. Remember that? And this scenario resonates with the idea of truth as a destabilizing force. Not so. Challenging the consequentialist perspective and the immediate closure of certain truth may actually lead to undesirable outcomes. And that's the dilemma. That's the dilemma that I'm trying to play in terms of comprehending the argument of truth versus lies. Not so. And the example here is that the economic downturn reflects how the truth, when exposed abruptly, can actually disrupt the social order and reveal vulnerabilities within the system. And that is something that you need to comprehend. And then number three, if you are to argue in terms of money haste, you could also argue in terms of introducing the so-called fake gold. Now a lie is now being introduced. Not so. Now when you argue in terms of philosophical perspective, the decision to introduce the concept of fake gold as a substitute for the missing real gold reflects a pragmatic approach. So pragmatism as a philosophical concept emphasizes the practical consequences of the actions. So in this case, introducing a strategic lie becomes a means to stabilize the economy and prevent further chaos, which obviously happened in the case of money heist. So the example here is that the lie about the fake gold is strategically employed to mitigate the negative consequences of the truth, highlighting the pragmatic considerations of maintaining stability for the greater good. And that is something, again, you may want to comprehend in terms of that particular movie, Money Heist. Now, you could also argue in terms of what they call economic recovery. Lying sustains order, not so. Lie sustains order. So philosophically, by way of perspective, the lie about the fake gold contributes to economic recovery, aligns with what they call unitarianism, where the focus is on the overall good well-being of the entire society. And that's the argument we argue in this book. Okay? So from a Unitarian standpoint, the lie serves as a means to achieve a positive outcome for the majority, even though it involves some kind of manipulation of the truth. And that's the point I'm trying to underscore here in terms of jurisprudence. So you'll bear with me. This is serious business by way of jurisprudence, and those of you who like thinking outside the box and throwing the box away. So the argument, by way of an example, is that the economic recovery based on the lie showcases a situation where strategic use of information or misinformation contributes to social order and actually well-being, at least in the short term. Not so. And then we can also create another example, again from this very movie, by way of underscoring what we call moral dilemmas and long-term consequences. So when you argue in terms of philosophical perspective, as the series progresses, the moral dilemmas faced by characters and the potential long-term consequences of life underscore what they call existentialists and deontological concerns. So questions about personal responsibility, authenticity, adherence to ethical principles also come to the forefront. And those are some of the things, again, we also argue in this book of how to get away with murder. And by way of example, characters grapple obviously with existential angst associated with living a lie and the consequences of other actions that raise ethical questions about the justifiability of deception for the greater good. Not so. And these are things that you need to comprehend in terms of understanding the disposition that we are arguing here. So listen, in terms of philosophical exploration, again, in this particular aspect of money heist, as I said, it has involved considering various ethical frameworks, including consequentialism, pragmatism, Unitarianism, existentialism, and deontology. And this series provides a complex of narrative that challenge traditional notions of truth and lies, prompting viewers, obviously, to reflect on what they call moral complexes in terms of inherent and maintaining social order through the manipulation of information. And that's something, again, that I'm really, really trying to comprehend. Now, let me take you a little bit on step number 3 as we delve a little bit deeper into the philosophical exploration of truth and lies in the context, again, of money heist, supported by, obviously, the perspectives of various philosophers and thinkers, so that we understand where these things come from. Everything that you see in society today has been propounded by certain thinkers today, and that's something you must understand. So the series again offers a rich narrative in terms of allowing for a new examination of ethical and existential themes. I wrote a book called Euronomics, Chuaherism, and Musevenical dispensation, and some of the propositions that I propose by way of philosophical dispensations in that particular book come from the ideologies and the philosophies that have been propounded by His Excellency, and how these have actually played, in Uganda today. You may want to find that book as well. Now, let's argue existential themes in terms of philosophical perspective. Existentialism, as explored by your friend Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, emphasize individual freedom, choice, and the quest for authenticity. So in the context of money heist, characters face what they call existential dilemmas as they grapple with consequences of living a lie and the impact of their sense of self. And if you argue that by way of a supporting author, you could look at Jean-Paul Sartre's concept of bad faith, in terms of it could be applied to characters who knowingly, live a lie, raising questions about the authenticity of their existence. And that is something that you may want to comprehend as well. Now, let's look at it in the context of Unitarianism and consequentialism, which, by the way, again argue in this book. In terms of Unitarianism and consequentialism, we could appreciate that philosophical perspective in terms of Unitarianism, advocated by your guy Jeremy Bentham and your guy John Stuart Mill, prioritize the greatest happiness for the greatest number. And from the Unitarian standpoint, the decision to introduce the concept of fake gold may actually be justified in its positive consequences for the social well-being. And that's the argument that is made in the Mignoret's case that we argue in this book of How to Get Away with Murder. In terms of supporting author, you may want to look at John Stuart Mill's principle of utility that could be applied to analyze whether the lies actually contribute to overall happiness or even social order. And that's a question that we may comprehend even in the societies that we live in today. Are they good? Is it good? Dr. King used to say, if they put you on a weighing scale, if you're good outweigh the bad, maybe that's not bad enough. Not so. So in terms of pragmatism, you could argue in terms of William James, philosophical perspective, pragmatism in terms of exemplified by William James. He stresses the practical consequences of beliefs, and in the context of money heist, the introduction of a lie about fake gold can actually be seen as a pragmatic decision to stabilize the economy and maybe prevent loss. Yeah, and another supporting author could be, as I said, William James. Obviously, his emphasis is on the practical effects of the beliefs that align with the decision to introduce a lie for the greater, good again. So you question that again as a question of jurisprudence, whether my introduction of a lie would actually be, understood to help better society. And then if you add in terms of deontological ethics, then you could invoke Immanuel Kant, yeah? And then if you deontological ethics as proposed by Immanuel Kant emphasizes what they call moral duties and principles. So Kant's categorical imperative, which emphasizes the importance of acting according to universal principles, could actually be applied to scrutinize the decision of a lie and its implications on moral duties. And as I said, Immanuel Kant's deontological framework prompts the examination of whether lying can actually be justified when evaluated against universal moral principles. And that's something you may want to comprehend again in terms of that. Yes, and yes, not so. Let's look at it another perspective. In terms of continuation, another author that may come into mind is Hannah Arendt, and also banality in terms of evil. Yeah, the banality in terms of evil. When you add in terms of philosophical perspective, Hannah Arendt's exploration of banality of evil can actually be applied to characters who, in the pursuit of their goals, engage in what they call deceptive actions. So Arendt's work invites a reflection on how individuals can actually be drawn into morally questionable actions with larger context. Okay? As I said, if you have to argue in terms of Hannah Arendt, by way of analysis of the, Eichmann's trial, for example, it raises questions about the responsibility of the individuals participating in actions that contribute to a larger system of deception. And that's the question perhaps that you may want to comprehend when you are arguing in terms of that concept. Then if you have to argue in terms of Michael Foucault and the power of dynamics, Michael Foucault and the power of dynamics by way of philosophical perspective, Michael Foucault's examination of power dynamics and knowledge could actually be applied to analyze how the control and manipulation of information contribute to the maintenance of social order. Yeah. And so the question here is that the series reflect how these who control the narrative wield significant power. Not so. So it's important for you to comprehend that Michael Foucault's concept of discourse and power in terms of relations offers a lens to understanding how the narrative can actually be construed and maintained in the series. Let's consider that part one, and let's be ready for part two, so we can comprehend on a larger and more broader perspective. I'll take a small health break. Okay. Now, before I take leave of what I talked about earlier, money heist, obviously through philosophical perspectives, as I said, through the works of different authors, allows a comprehensive analysis in terms of ethical and essential, even societal implications. Yeah, and these characters, obviously regarding truth and lies, the series becomes a philosophical canvas that prompts us to contemplate the complexities of human behavior and the consequence of navigating a world where truth and deception are actually intertwined. Okay, now dishonesty and lies can actually play a complex role in maintaining social order, and that's the point that I have to keep saying on and on. On one hand, a certain level of trust and truthfulness is essential for functioning of a society, so because it fosters cooperation and stability. However, some argue that strategic or even white lies may serve as social lubricants, smoothing interactions and even preventing unnecessary conflicts. And these are laughable things, and yet interesting enough, because they shape our society that we live in today. So at the same time, an excess of deceit can actually erode trust, not so, leading to a breakdown in societal cohesion. Systems built on falsehood may actually create disparities and injustices, ultimately undermining the very order that can aim to uphold. So therefore, striking a right balance between transparency and tactful communication is actually crucial when it comes to a healthy societal social fabric. Not so. Now, the exploration of white lies and dishonesty in maintaining social order has actually been also a recurring theme in various philosophical discussions, and I'm going to try to delve into some relevant quotes from some philosophical perspectives, so that you can comprehend and understand and say, hey, wait a minute, this thing is with us. Not so. Okay? Now listen, the concept of white lies, often defined as minor or even harmless or falsehoods told to avoid hurting someone's feelings, not so, or to maintain social harmony, has actually been explored philosophically with varying perspectives. So philosophers and ethicists have actually debated the ethical implications of such lies and their roles in maintaining social order. And I'm going to delve into some philosophical considerations surrounding these white lies, now that you comprehend what white lies may be. Okay? If we had to argue it in terms of Unitarian perspective, we can argue by way of Unitarian standpoint that the morality of an action is determined by its overall utility or happiness that is produced. Yeah? So white lies may actually be justified if they contribute to the greater happiness of individuals or society by avoiding unnecessary harm or conflict. For example, if telling the truth in a certain situation that would actually cause undue distress or harm, a white lie might actually be considered more acceptable if it promotes overall well-being. That's a question of debate for you. Now, if you have to argue in terms of what they call Kantian perspective, yeah, by way of supporting evidence, Immanuel Kant, in terms of deontological ethics emphasizes the importance of moral principles and the duty to uphold them. So from a Kantian perspective, lying, even for seemingly benevolent reasons, might be considered morally wrong because it goes against the categorical imperative. Not so. So for example, Kant would argue that one would not lie under any circumstances, as lying undermines the principles of truthfulness and treats others as a means to an end. So that's something that you may comprehend by way of argument in terms of Kant's comprehension of issues. Now, if you are to argue in terms of what they call virtue ethics, if you argue in terms of virtue ethics, then you must understand that when you look at supporting evidence, virtue ethics basically focuses on the development of what they call a virtuous character in terms of traits. So whether a white lie is actually considered morally acceptable, it may depend on virtues such as honesty, compassion, and even empathy. An example: if, for example, a white lie is actually motivated by genuine concern for others and is not a habitual practice, it may be seen as an expression of virtues like kindness and even understanding. Right? That's good food for you for thought, not so? Now, let's look at it in terms of what they call social contract theory. Now, if you're to argue in terms of what they call social contract theories, such as those proposed by philosophers like John Rawls, they highlight the importance of individuals agreeing to certain rules for the benefit of society. So white lies may actually be seen as a social lubricant that helps maintain cooperation and harmony. Again, the operative word here being social lubricant that maintains cooperation and harmony. An example is, for example, in terms of social interactions, the acceptance of small or well-intentioned lies might actually be part of the unspoken agreement to prioritize social coercion over absolute truthfulness. And that's something that you may want to comprehend. Even whether you're a Christian or not, or whether you're Muslim, or whether you're religious or not, we've seen some of those social lubricants in scriptures where people have come out to say them for the betterment perhaps of the well-being of society. How about if you argue in terms of cultural relativism? In terms of cultural relativism, we acknowledge that ethical standards may actually vary across cultures, and I told that before. So in some cultures, white lies may actually be more socially accepted, and the moral evaluation of such lies may depend on such cultural norms. I give an example that in some societies, the use of white lies to preserve harmony might actually align with cultural expectations, masking them more ethically permissible within that cultural context. Not so. That is something that you may also want to look at as well. Now, if you're to argue in terms of empirical evidence, in terms of supporting, they would argue and say psychological studies have actually explored the impact of honesty and deception on interpersonal relationships. So research basically suggests that occasional and well-intentioned white lies may actually contribute to smoother social interactions or stronger relationships. I'll give an example. Studies on communication patterns often highlight the importance of what they call tactful communication and considerate language in maintaining positive and social dynamics. And that is something that you may also want to think about as well. So listen, the point I'm trying to underscore here is that in philosophy, or in terms of philosophical exploration of this argument of white lies, it involves considering various ethical frameworks under the implications in terms of for individuals and societal well-being. So while different perspectives, as I said, may offer various viewpoints, the nuances in terms of the context or the intentions and the consequences usually play a very crucial role in determining the moral acceptability of white lies in maintaining what they call social order. And that is something that you may also want to consider. Now, let's argue a little bit of pragmatic considerations as well. If you have to argue in terms of pragmatic considerations, then by way of what? Supporting evidence. Pragmatism as a philosophical approach emphasizes the practical consequences of actions. From a pragmatic standpoint, white lies might actually be justified if they lead to positive outcomes and contribute to the overall functionality of social relationships. Let me give an example. Pragmatically, telling a small reassuring lie to comfort someone in a difficult situation may actually be seen as an action that aligns with the pragmatic principles, and it prevents unnecessary emotional distress. We like a little bit of that sometimes, don't know? I think the majority of us, call it faith if you like, for those of you who are scholars in terms of theology. But also, let's argue in terms of evolutionary psychology. If you argue in terms of supporting evidence, evolutionary psychology suggests that certain behaviors, including the tendency to engage in deception, may actually have evolved as adaptive strategies. So white lies, if they contribute to social cohesion and cooperation, might actually be viewed through the lens of what they call evolutionary advantage. So by way of an example, In small, for example, close-knit groups, maintaining social harmony through occasional white lies may actually have what they call provided an evolutionary advantage by fostering cooperation and actually reducing internal conflicts. And that's something, again, that you may want to think about in that aspect as well. Then you could also argue in terms of what they call contextual ethics. In terms of arguing for supporting evidence, some ethical theories emphasize the importance of considering the context and the particulars of a situation when making judgments. So white lies, when assessed in a context of specific relationships and circumstances, may actually be deemed ethically acceptable. By way of an example, contextual ethics may actually consider the motivations behind a white lie, such as protecting someone's feelings or even maintaining a positive social atmosphere, as factors that influence the moral evaluation of the action. So that is something again you want to think about when you're making that dispensation as well. So if you look at it in terms of what they call long-term consequences, that's another argument when it comes to this argument of white lies. Now, when you're talking about long-term consequences, philosophical discussions often involve considerations of what they call long-term consequences. So white lies may actually be seen as acceptable if they actually contribute to the long-term stability and well-being of relationship and society. And that is something, again, that you may also want to look at. I'll give an example. Overemphasizing on absolute truthfulness in a situation could actually lead to social conflicts, yeah? Whereas judicious use of white lies might actually contribute to the overall harmony and the stability of what they call social interactions. These are interesting discussions, and that's why you see me appreciating and comprehending them in that context. Now, in examining, as I said, the concept of white lies from various philosophical perspectives, definitely it becomes evident that that the evaluation of their morality is complex and context dependent. That's something you must understand. And the interplay between ethical frameworks, cultural norms, and then psychological insights and pragmatic considerations basically underscores the nuanced nature of philosophical discussions surrounding the use of white lies in maintaining social order. So ultimately, the assessment of white lies basically requires a thoughtful and examination of the the underlying principles and the values that actually guide ethical decisions in making different philosophical contexts, if you like. So that is something that is super important. Now, let's take a health break and again go to part 3. My health breaks come by way of coughing so that I can clear the throat. Ordinarily, I should have a drink, perhaps take one so that I can comprehend. Okay. Let me argue for you the invention of lying from that movie, the 2009 movie directed by Ricky Gervais and Matthew Robinson. Also, this provides a chronological exploration of these philosophical concepts within the context of the movie. So, the invention of lying, which is a 2009 satirical comedy film directed by Ricky Gervais and Matthew Robinson. The film was basically set in an alternate reality where everyone always tells the truth and the concept of lying doesn't exist. So the story follows Mark Belson, played by Ricky Gervais, who works as a screenwriter in a film industry where fiction is limited to mundane and unaspiring narratives. Yeah. So one day, your guy Mark discovers the ability to lie, and this newfound skill allows him to say things that are not true, and as a consequence, manipulates and perceptions of those around him. And the film explores the consequences of Mark's ability to lie in a world where everyone else is incapable of doing so. And that's the funny thing about it. I don't want to say the good thing about it, but as Mark uses his newfound power of personal gain, including financial success and romantic pursuits, he actually also grapples with the moral implications of deception and the impact of lying on interpersonal relationships. So the narrative takes an unexpected turn as Mark's ability to lie becomes a source of social and psychological commentary, touching themes of authenticity, morality, and even societal expectation. Yeah? Now, the invention of lying blends elements of comedy, obviously, and some social satire with psychological underpinnings or undertones, creating a thought-provoking exploration of truth, deception, and the complexities of human relationship. So the film features a cast that includes, as I said, Rick Gavas, Jennifer Garner, Rob Lowe, and Tina Fey, among others. While the movie actually received mixed reviews, it gained recognition for its unique premise and its comedic yet insightful role in terms of honesty and dishonesty in human interactions. And that's the point that I want to comprehend even as we argue today. So in this particular concept, the invasion of lying, it explores several deep philosophical concepts within the context of truth and lies and societal dynamics. And I'm going to give some key philosophical themes and associated them with particular authors in terms of underscoring what we understand lying today. Let's begin with what they call existential authenticity. And here we'll argue in terms of Jean-Paul Sartre. Not so. The film delves into what they call existentialist themes, particularly the concept of authenticity, and Marx's ability to lie prompts reflections on the authenticity of his identity and the choices he makes in the face of these societal expectations. Yeah, and then philosophical authors like Jean-Paul Sartre, existentialist philosophies emphasizes individual freedom and responsibility, and aligns with the exploration of authenticity in this particular film. So that's something that you may want to look out for as you argue that. And then if you argue in terms of Unitarianism, under that we're talking about your guy John Stuart Mills, and Marx's use of lying as for personal gain reflects what they call Unitarian considerations, where actions are evaluated based on their contribution to the overall happiness or pleasure. And that's something you may want to think about, whether or not that can become substantially true. So John Stuart Mills, a Unitarian philosopher, argued for the greatest happiness principle, suggesting that actions should actually be judged by their tendency to promote happiness. And that's the question that you and I may want to debate in terms of whether or not it's really reality or it's good for you and me. Perhaps yes, perhaps no. Now, if you are to argue in terms of deontological ethics, your guy Immanuel Kant comes into play, and the film raises questions about the moral implications of lying. Yeah, connecting with what they call deontological ethics. So Marx's moral dilemma in terms of echoes Kant's categorical imperative, emphasizes the moral duties and the universality of what they call ethical principles. So Immanuel Kant's deontological framework provides a lens to analyze the moral dilemmas presented within the movie or within the film for that purpose. And that is something that you may also want to understand. Another concept that you may want to understand is what they call social constructivism. And here the scholar would be Michael Foucault. Michael Foucault, who's a favorite one of my friends, in terms of concepts, the invasion of lying serves as a social critique, exploring power dynamics and how knowledge, in this case lying, shapes societal structures. And the film aligns with Michael Foucault's idea about the relationship between power, knowledge, and societal norms. So you may want to comprehend that Michael Foucault's works, such as Discipline and Punish, provide insights into how institutions influence behavior and shape societal dynamics. And that is something that you may also want to comprehend. And then if you're to argue it in terms of what they call pragmatism, then we have to look at William James. The concept in terms of Marx's use of lies for pragmatic reasons, such as improving his personal or even professional life, resonates with the pragmatic philosophy. Yeah, pragmatism emphasizes the practical consequences of beliefs and actions, and that is something again you may want to comprehend. But importantly, here, in terms of the philosophical author, William James becomes a key figure in pragmatism. He argues that for pragmatism as a method and the importance of considering the practical consequences of the ideas, and that is something that you may want to comprehend when you're arguing that as well. And then if you're to argue in terms of what they call moral evolution, here you may want to invoke your guy called Rollins Kohlberg. Rollins Kohlberg, by way of this, if you're related to the movie, you could argue and say the film touches upon the evolution of Marx's moral consciousness as he grapples with the consequences of systematic lying. This aligns with the Kohlberg's stages of moral development, you have to comprehend that. Rollins Kohlberg argues in terms of what they call developmental psychology, Okay, he proposed a theory of what they call moral development, with stages reflecting an individual's evolving understanding of morality, and that is something that you may want to comprehend as well. Now listen, the point here is that the invention of lying basically engages us, or you and I, with various philosophical concepts, and therefore it invokes us to draw inspirations from existentialists, Unitarianism, deontologists, or social constructivists, pragmaticists, and developmental perspectives in terms of exploring the implications of truth and lies in a fictional yet thought-provoking narrative. And that is the aspect that I want us to comprehend here. Now, if you're to argue in terms of the absence of deception, truth as a default, for example, let's just argue that for the sake, absence of deception, truth as a default. In terms of philosophical concept, the initial premise in this particular concept of the film, whereas everyone tells truth without the concept of deception, it can be associated with the idealized form of transparency and authenticity. And basically this aligns with certain aspects of Kantian deontology, emphasizing the moral duty to tell the truth, not so. And also, if you have to look at it in terms of the introduction of deception, lying as a social construct, then you may want to argue in terms of philosophical concepts. So when the protagonist discovers the ability to lie and introduces a pragmatic element, echoing the philosophy of William James, then the introduction of deception is a pragmatic response to societal expectations and the interpersonal dynamics. And that is also something that you may want to comprehend as well. And then if you're looking at it in terms of Unitarian use of lies for personal gain, then you would argue in terms of philosophical concept that as the protagonist realizes the personal advantages of lying, then the film explores Unitarian considerations, yeah? And this reflection, in terms of Unitarian perspective, lies are actually employed for individual happiness or gain, and that is something that you need to look at as well. Then another important aspect you may want to argue is in terms of what they call moral implications of lying. When you're looking at that, then you will look at the philosophical concept in terms of that angle. And the narrative here is that the film delves into moral implications of lying, and this aligns with the ontological ethics, especially Kant's categorical imperative in terms of raising questions about the universality of lying as a moral action. And that is something that, again, you don't want to leave out in terms of comprehending that particular aspect. Now, in terms of also comprehending what they call the consequences of systematic deception, you may want to argue that the movie also explores the consequences of widespread deception and its impact on what they call personal relationships and societal order. And this can actually be associated with the consequentialist perspectives, where morality of an action is actually determined for its outcomes. And that is something that is super, again, important for you to comprehend. Then if you have to argue in terms of what they call existential themes of authenticity and self-identity, in terms of the philosophical concept, the protagonist's journey involves what they call existential themes, particularly, certain authenticity. Yeah, the ability to lie prompts reflections on the authenticity of one's identity and choices made in the face of societal expectations. And this is again something that's also important for us to comprehend. And you may also want to look at it in terms of what they call social critique and power dynamics. Again, remember, in terms of philosophical concept, the movie also serves as a social critique, delving into what they call power dynamics associated with lying, not so. And this aligns with your guide, Michael Foucault's exploration of how knowledge and discourse shapes social structures and hierarchies, if you like. So that's something that's important for you to comprehend. And then, if you have to look at it in terms of what they call pragmatism of white lies, then the philosophy in terms of the concept itself, throughout the movie, the use of lies for social harmony and pragmatism reasons or aligns with what they call pragmatic approach in terms of communication, reflecting William James's emphasis of the practical consequences of beliefs. And that is something, again, that you may also want to comprehend. And then if you have to argue in terms of what they call evolution of moral consciousness, that's something, again, also that is important. By way of philosophical concept, the protagonist here also, in terms of evolving by way of understanding, the concept of morality and the consequences of systematic lying touches upon the evolution of moral consequences, okay? And the theme resonates with moral philosophical discussions on the development of ethical frameworks. and that is something that you also may want to comprehend as you argue out these issues. So the point here I'm trying to drive, my friends, is that in the invention of lying, as I said, the exploration of these philosophical concepts are intertwined with the protagonist's discovery and the use of deception in a world, again, where lying, as I said, was initially absent. So it provides us with thought-provoking examination of complexities and consequences that are associated with truth, but also with falsehoods. So it's extremely important for us to comprehend in terms of understanding the invention of lying vis-a-vis money heist, in terms of comprehending these theories or undertakings that we've been exploring. Let me give you some quotes that may explain a little bit of the things that we've been discussing about. And the one that I started with, you remember the one that I started with? In war, the truth is so precious that it must be accompanied by a bodyguard of lies. That is often attributed to your friend Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister or former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom during World War II. And the statement basically reflects the strategic use of misinformation and deception during the times of war. Yeah, and the point here is that Churchill's words suggest that revealing the truth or the full truth, I think the word is the full truth, in wartime context may not always be strategically sound, not so. Perhaps look at the other one, The Art of War by Zanzu, yeah? And the 48 Laws of Power. But also the point here is that the use of bodyguard of lies implies the deliberate creation and dissemination of false information to protect the true intentions or plans or capabilities of a nation engaged in warfare. And this tactic is often associated with military deception or strategic misinformation and campaigns. And it's very evident in the world that we live in today, even as facets of our own being, as I just pointed out those two books for you. So there are also key aspects that we may consider in understanding that particular quote that was done by Winston Churchill. As I said, number one, strategic deception. Churchill recognized the importance of maintaining an element of surprise and confusion in military operations, and therefore by surrounding the truth with a bodyguard of lies, military leaders could actually mislead the enemy to protect their own strategic objective. Not so. And it could also be argued also in terms of what they call operational security. Disclosing sensitive information, for example, during wartime, can actually compromise the effectiveness of military operations. Not so. And therefore the need for secrecy and selective disclosure of information aligns with the idea that truth, while precious, requires protection. And those are questions of debate for those of you who are truthful people. Not so. And then if you add in terms of psychological warfare, deception tactics can actually also have what they call a psychological impact on the enemy. And the intentional spread of false information may actually create uncertainty or even sow seeds of discord and weaken the opponent's morale. Not so. Whether deliberately or not. So it's important, my friends, to note that while this quote reflects a pragmatic approach in terms of information management during wartime, obviously there will be those who will argue and say it raises ethical considerations, and the deliberate dissemination of false information can have consequences beyond the battlefield, affecting the public perception and trust. Maybe that's the reason why he was not voted back into office after winning the war. Can you imagine? Yet he was celebrated as a war hero. Not so. So the argument is that Churchill's quote captures the complex and often morally ambiguous nature of handling information in the context of war, where strategic imperative to win may actually involve navigating a landscape where truth is shielded by a carefully constructed bodyguard of lies. I'll give you another course that will help us drive our points a little bit more. There's one by Soren Kierkegaard, and he says there are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true. The other is to refuse to believe what is true. Think about that. Kierkegaard emphasizes on the importance of truth, reflects the idea that both accepting falsehoods and rejecting essential truth can actually have negative consequences for individuals and societal well-being. I'll give you another quote that will help you to comprehend what we are saying. One by your guy called Immanuel Kant, the one we've been talking about so much. He says that act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. Think about that. So Kant categorically imperative highlights the importance of acting in a way that could be universally acceptable. So applying this to lies, one might actually question whether a world where everyone lies for social harmony is actually sustainable. And that's another good quote for food for thought, not so. Then I'll give you another interesting one by your friend Plato, whom other people call Plato or Plato. He says, false words are not only evil in themselves, but they infect the soul with evil. The argument here, Plato's perspective underscores the potential harm that dishonesty can inflict on one's individual, suggesting that lies have actually a corrupting influence on the soul, not so. Who said that the lie takes the truth moves the lie moves half around the world before the truth puts on the shoe, but the truth reaches there many days before the lie does so. I'll give you another quote by Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche says that I am not upset that you lied to me. I am upset from now on that I can't believe you. So Nietzsche's quote reflects the idea that the erosion of trust, which often accompanies dishonesty, can have profound and lasting effects on relationships and even societal structures. And that is something that you may want to comprehend as well, even as we engage in this. Then I'll give you another one by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Some of you remember that guy, not so? Where he says, society corrupts the individual. It's only in the state of nature that we find man as he should be, and it is society that makes him what he is not. Think about that. Rousseau's critique of social influences suggests that dishonesty within societal structures can actually contribute to the corruption of individuals and the breakdown of a more natural state. And that's something that you may want to think about. I'll give you another one by your friend called Albert Camus, who said the absurd is the essential concept and the first truth. Camus, in his exploration of the absurd, prompts a reflection on the contradictions and the irrationality that actually may arise from a society built on falsehood. So the argument I'm propounding here, my friends, is that these quotes provide different perspectives on the impact of society on individuals, basically raising important questions about the nature of truth, ethics, and the delicate balance between transparency and maintaining social order. So even as we engage in this argument of how to tell lies or whether or not lies are good, we should be very careful in terms of creating that balance. So the argument again here, the profound exploration of the philosophy of truth and lies in terms of navigating social order in money heist and how to get away or lying has given us a narrative of a philosophical vein or pulse through which human experience usually do operate, and it should be a beacon to guide us through, as I said, the intricate journey of existential quandaries, ethical conundrums, and societal dynamics interwoven with the delicate threads of truth in this world of deception. So we have to be very careful to comprehend some of the things. I have been fair enough to discuss some of these components for you. I would have loved to go on and on, but again, find our books, all our books, at lubogo.org, suegeneslawup.com. Find all these books at Amazon, Scribd, Digital to Draft. Find any substantive, go on the net. These books are readily available, and lubogo.org and suegeneslawup.com. We are here to help you to try to demystify the law for you and to comprehend some of these important aspects that the world is grappling in today and tomorrow. Once again, my name is Isaac Christopher Lubogo. Thank you for your attention. God bless you. I'll take leave. And thank you for your attention.